I'm Dr. Susan Rich, and we're here for our first Better Safe Than Sorry project talk show. Basically, our talk show is to augment what we already have on the blog, and every week we're going to have a new segment with similar of our young ladies present, and they're going to introduce themselves. Why don't we go ahead and do that to begin with before we get started. I'm Dr. Susan Rich. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist in Potomac, Maryland. And these are some of my friends who are college students and a graduate student who have agreed to chit-chat about alcohol and unprotected sex and what they think of it.
Hi, I'm Daniele. I have a degree in social work, and I've been working with Dr. Susan Rich for the last, almost a year on creating a blog for the Better Safe Than Sorry project, and I'm doing a presentation, and we're all very excited to start our talk show now.
I'm Sarah Roberts. I just graduated with my BA in psychology, and I've been helping Dr. Rich with the Better Safe Than Sorry project at Churchill High School.
I'm Sydney Booton, and I go to Salisbury University, and I'm a psychology major, and I joined the Better Safe Than Sorry project this winter.
Hi, I'm Juliana Pietri. I'm going to be a junior at Loyola University, New Orleans, and I'm a criminal justice major, and I just started working with Dr. Rich on the Better Safe Than Sorry project.
And I'm so excited that we're all here. I know you guys had a chance to look over some of the statistics that we've been concerned about, and the CDC, especially the Centers for Disease Control, has been really, really concerned about young women drinking. And it turns out today young women are drinking at higher rates than young men even, and getting really, really sick. So you guys had a chance to look over some of the stuff we've been posting on the blog. What did you think? I mean, you're just coming back from your first, well, not first year of college, but some of you graduated already, and a couple have finished a couple years. What do you think of that data based on what you've seen in college?
Well, having completed 2 years of college already, I see firsthand girls who will purposely not eat so they can get drunk faster, and what it says in the statistics is that girls don't metabolize alcohol the same way men do, so it puts them at higher risk for all the alcohol poisoning related things. And girls who binge drink are 63% more likely to get pregnant than girls who don't drink.
Right, and there's two unfortunate statistics that go along with that. One being that 50% of pregnancies are unplanned. So if you're binge drinking and you're 63% higher chance of getting pregnant, those women are contributing to that statistic of unplanned pregnancies.
And I think what's most concerning is how damage can happen as early as 2 weeks after conception. Yeah. So that's too early to ever find out that you're even pregnant in the first place.
Right, and like you said, the metabolism of the young women is half that of young men because they have less of an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, which helps digest the alcohol. And we had presented to Churchill about this statistic and many other things, and shown pictures from colleges. Some of them were funny, but one was a T-shirt. Do you guys remember the T-shirt that said,
Girls drinking team?
Yeah, girls drinking team, drink better than the boys or something like that. And it was like one of those shirts that would be worn tightly over your bosoms. And to sort of, flash the fact that you're going to be drinking a lot at the party. So we wanted to educate young women about this not being a good thing. We got feedback from Churchill that, yeah, it's great that we kind of targeted young women with the issue, but Sarah, what did we find out that they wanted to know more about?
They wanted to know more about the men. They thought we should talk more about how the men have to be responsible, and it wasn't just the girls saying that. It was the guys saying, like, we're responsible, and they wanted us to educate more people about that.
Yeah, and one of the things we did focus on was like drunk texting. So guys, that text in the middle of the night. Maybe you guys have gotten a booty call before. Back in the day, before texting, back in my day, payphones, whatever. But kind of dating myself. But I remember in medical school, time to time, getting drunk texts from people, not text, it'd be a phone call. And hey, you want to come over? They couldn't even speak legibly. It's like, who is this? And if you're too anxious to talk to me when we're in class together, why are you waiting? You know, it's really embarrassing to call somebody in the middle of the night and not be able to make a coherent sentence. And the other thing we told them at Churchill is your plumbing doesn't work right when you're inebriated, right? The guy's plumbing. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Okay.
Yes.
Just in the event that there might be little kids that get on YouTube and see what we're talking about, we couch our language, right? Yeah, so boys do need to be included in this, and we, very much want to do that. But, again, we're women. We need to be concerned about women. Safety, right? And that was one of the things we talked about. But boys need to be responsible too, and not getting girls purposefully drunk.
I think a really big issue is that sex goes both ways. Girls and boys should both make sure that they're using protection, because I know that in the end it's girls who are in control of their body, but the guy is responsible for it too. And so the girl should be responsible for making sure there's contraception, but the guy should never intend to have intercourse with the girl if it's unprotected.
And that's a really good point, Juliana. It turns out that if I were to give, say, a couple, the man or the woman, a medication that's going to cause a birth defect, and there are plenty out there that, as a psychiatrist, I treat people with. As an example, Depakote. Okay, Depakote is something we use for bipolar disorder. If I were to put a woman or a man on Depakote, I'm going to ensure that their partner is using contraception, and they are too. It's called double contraception. And why is that, do you think? Because Depakote can cause birth defects. We wouldn't want babies inadvertently exposed. Why would it be important to use two forms of contraception?
I think because birth control can be affected by antibiotics or medicines. So there's no guarantee that birth control can work, and there's no guarantee that condoms work either.
Right.
So it's better to be protected on both sides, because I feel like a lot of guys will be like, oh, it's not my body, like it's not my problem if it's like a one-night stand or something, like I'll never see the girl again. But that's not fair for all the responsibility to be put on the girl.
That's right.
And men seem to feel like because they know a girl's on birth control that they don't need to use protection, but they also don't know that birth control is not 100% effective. And if a girl is on an antibiotic which counteracts her birth control, that's zero contraceptives then.
Can you guys think of some reasons that, say, young reproductive age women would be on birth control, not birth control, but antibiotics?
Especially for girls in high school and college, you get sick and they go on antibiotics, especially in college when you're living in dorms or being around so many people sharing drinks and everything, you're at a higher risk to get sick. And you can get something like mono or just strep or something really common, and you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, I'll take my antibiotics, but you don't realize that the antibiotics could possibly counteract the birth control. And you have no idea, and then all of a sudden you find out you're pregnant. And you're like, I'm on birth control, I'm so confused, how did this happen?
Right, and acne is another reason that a lot of young women are on antibiotics, right? And, young men too, but, they don't use the same kind of contraception we do. So were there other parts of the statistics that you guys found, or what you've been reading so far that we've put on the blog? There have been some posts that actually, Daniela, you've uploaded from People, and I think we shared the links with the group.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
There was an interesting post about 4 women telling their story about like how they happened to have a child with FASD. Those were like 4 really interesting life stories. Some used alcohol just to like cope with their relationship, with their abusive relationship. Another woman, like she was on birth control as well, so she thought she was all like protected, but then she was taking antibiotics. So she was drinking and trying to cope with stress. and had a child with FASD and didn't know how it happened at first.
Mhm.
What I think is really sad is how there are women who drink when they're pregnant because their users will force them to.
To kind of
Yeah.
force a miscarriage.
Yeah.
To force a miscarriage to make sure they don't have the baby.
And they think that it's going to be, like that,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, even though alcohol is a really potent neurodevelopmental teratogen, that means it causes, brain damage and neurological problems, it's not as potent at, say being lethal, okay? And that's true based on adults using, right? It takes a whole lot to actually kill somebody. And with babies, SIDS, have you heard of sudden infant death syndrome?
Mhm.
There's a pretty high percentage of SIDS babies that were prenatally exposed before the women really knew they were pregnant, and it affects the center of the brain that controls respiration and your heartbeat. It's basically your reptilian brain. It affects even at that level during development. So the babies have a harder time regulating their respirations and their heart rate, blood pressure, things like that. So SIDS is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand can be associated with prenatal alcohol exposure. The other thing is, have you heard of spina bifida or cerebral palsy? So it turns out that, again, prenatal alcohol exposure can affect that as well. There's a lot of things, for babies that it can. And, before we know we're pregnant, many of these things can happen.
Mostly it's already too late when you find out that you're pregnant. You're already like mostly a month pregnant, and if you have been drinking, and especially binge drinking for the whole month, then your baby's baby's brain is already damaged.
Because women will claim that they didn't drink while they were pregnant, but that just means that once they found out they were pregnant, they stopped drinking. They don't realize the damage has already been done.
Right.
And in the medical profession, we call that prior to pregnancy recognition. And it's so sad, in my view, that physicians and kind of healthcare providers have this lingo that every American isn't aware of, and that lay people are not aware of. Okay, we're very aware in the medical community that many things happen prior to pregnancy recognition. What about the warning label on alcohol? Is that even adequate? I'm just going to ask you guys that you reflect on that for a minute. What it says is, does anybody, have you, okay.
I barely even noticed them.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't have alcohol in my household except for one bottle of liquor that we used during, it was vodka. My daughter did a science experiment looking at the effects of alcohol on plants. She compared bleach to alcohol and to water. I'm going to go and get that. Why don't you guys chat a little bit more about that, and we're going to read the label and see what you think, okay? Okay.
There's also the issue of women. There's one of the 4 women in the article said that she was planning on getting an abortion, and then she went to jail and changed her mind and had already been drinking because she planned on getting the abortion, so that there was already a prenatal alcohol exposure there.
And the other woman, she wanted to have an abortion too, but when she went to see the doctor, she was already too far into the pregnancy because she didn't even realize when she got pregnant, so she couldn't get an abortion anymore.
Yeah, these things are people need to make more of a conscious effort to find out if they're pregnant and when they are pregnant, how far along they are, so they can make a correct decision to abort or not abort and to drink or not drink.
And it's actually so easy, like just use contraception.
Yeah.
If you're drinking and you're pulling around with the guy.
Like in the article how it says if you use alcohol, don't get pregnant, and if you're trying to get pregnant, don't use alcohol.
It's
And
not that hard.
it's the simplest
That
solution.
simple.
It really
Right.
is.
And it's really hard. Like we also posted an article about their children later on to kind of show what struggles they have in their life and what struggles the moms have with their children. So it's just not fair to them to have a life full of struggles.
Girls, I am just perplexed. You know where this is? Okay, I had this down in the basement, and I brought it back up. It was filled with dust because, it was in my laundry room. And looking around here, just glance at it. Do you see a label?
No.
Okay. It took me all the time that I was walking here, and I finally found it
On the top.
right there.
Can barely
Yeah,
read it.
Can you read that?
And when you're buying
Yes.
alcohol, you don't look that closely at the bottle to read everything it says.
I'm gonna just put this right here. I don't know if you can. All right, and can you make heads or tails of that? Can you read it? Okay. All right, so first of all, it's in gold lettering on a red background. Can you read it, Daniela? Because I don't have my glasses. I have contacts in, and it's too microscopic.
According to the Surgeon General, women should not drink alcoholic beverages during pregnancy because of the risk of birth defects.
Okay. So women shouldn't drink alcoholic beverages during pregnancy because of the risk of birth defects. Okay, you ladies are bright. What's wrong with that?
What about people who are trying to get pregnant and aren't pregnant yet? Like they're drinking and they contracept and they don't know they're pregnant. They're still drinking. That's really
After
harmful.
months, they find out they're
Right.
pregnant. Oops.
They stop their
Right.
contraception, they're
Right.
still drinking, they get pregnant,
And
or
I-
their contraception fails.
I think the fact that the label is so small on the bottle just makes it seem like people aren't considering it a big enough deal. Like they don't think it's that big of an issue. Like on TV you see commercials for the effects of smoking cigarettes and all that stuff and how you shouldn't smoke cigarettes, but there's never once anything on how you should not be drinking alcohol when you're pregnant and what could happen for that.
If you're
So how
pregnant
come-
or planning a
yeah.
pregnancy,
So how come not smoking cigarettes is a big deal, but drinking while pregnant or planning a pregnancy is not a big deal?
right, and actually the Surgeon General came out with an updated warning in 2005, February 2005, to say that if you're pregnant or planning a pregnancy, to avoid alcohol, and essentially plan your pregnancy very carefully to avoid inadvertent alcohol exposure. Now, I reframed that last sentence to say, if you're using alcohol, avoid pregnancy. If you have religious contraindications to use of contraceptives, in those cases, cross your legs, right? Ladies, you know what that means. It means don't have sex. Okay, and if parents of young ladies encourage them not to use contraception, maybe there are those devices that they can put on their daughters to lock them up. But I don't think we do that anymore, do we? I mean, there were back in the day, believe it or not. I don't know what they're called. Chastity belts. There you go, right?
They now have things like anti-rape underwear and stuff like that that only the underwear that only a girl can take off. They're coming out with all these new devices, but it's like it's up to you. Just don't have sex if you are drinking alcohol.
And
Use contraception. Yeah.
or contracept. And what was it that you said earlier, Juliana, about young women and the rate being around 63% of those who binge drink end up,
63% of women who binge drink are more likely to be teen mothers than those who don't. And that's a really high percentage. That's over half.
Right. And so what we're doing, in my mind, by allowing alcohol to flow freely and not suggesting that people contracept, is we're actually creating the lower class of our population. Now think about that one. You guys have taken sociology. You're a social work major. Why is that? Why do you think that's true?
They're easier to handle so that the government can make whatever decision they want to make because they are not,
Because they have people that
wouldn't
are now.
complain, right?
Right. And actually, Aldous Huxley, in his book in 1931, anybody ever read A Brave New World? You've heard of it, right? In that book, they took small amounts of alcohol and put it into the test tubes that babies were developing in. This is 1931. This was his idea. He was a philosopher. He said, in order to create the deltas and epsilons of the population, so there were alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons, I think. To create the sort of lower classes, you just needed to put alcohol into the flask that the baby was developing in. Now he, first of all, came up with the idea of test tube babies all the way, maybe it wasn't him, but through his readings and, scientific literature. But the other thing he knew in 1931 is that alcohol causes what?
Birth defects.
Birth
Lower
defects, brain
IQs,
damage,
yeah.
lower
Which
IQs.
would lead to a lower class.
Yeah.
Which would lead to a lower class. And we're allowing that to happen so that more and more people are going to be dependent on social services, right? Because they can't, these individuals have a very difficult time maintaining employment. Many of them end up incarcerated. Juliana, you're learning about that in your criminal justice.
Yeah, most of the people on death row, they don't realize it, but they have fetal alcohol syndrome, and that's why they're on death row, because they don't have the brain capacity or the development that everyone else does to know that what the crime they're committing is wrong.
Yeah, and it may not be a majority of people on death row, but there is a significant percentage. A colleague of mine, Natalie Novick-Brown, has interviewed and examined over 61 of the 3,500 people on death row. She runs an organization called FASD Experts, and she only does high-stakes capital cases, and has found 61 of these individuals. And she's only one person, and she's only asked to see certain numbers. Now, I have my license in other states to do this work, and I only see individuals who have been exposed to moderate to heavy amounts of alcohol, so they have to know that before they hire me onto the case. But even with that, just in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been doing this work, I've seen a high number of people.
I think an issue with that also is a lot of the people on death row who have FASD is that they don't know that they have it.
Right.
People just assume that they are crazy or criminals and stuff, but they don't know the alcohol exposure that they had when they were younger. Because a lot, like we said before, a lot of moms claim that when they were pregnant they didn't drink.
Right. And of the cases that I see, as an example in Pennsylvania, a lot of these are like now in their 50s or 60s, and their parents, even grew huckleberries and blueberries and things and made their home brew on their farms. And the women would just drink all weekend with their husbands and not even think twice about doing it while they were pregnant. So that's, one of the aspects. But you're right, Juliana. A lot of doctors would say, well, why even diagnose this? Because we can't help the children. I do believe we can, and I have cases in my private practice to prove it. I've helped these kids. You just have to look at it a little bit like we do with autism. You start early, you provide the appropriate supports that they need, whether they have evidence of attention problems, learning problems. You have to understand that it's from prenatal injury. And to start putting systems in place to help support the child. By the time they're 12 or 13, I do let them know. I see a lot of cases of kids adopted from Russia and the Ukraine. And in those cases, by the time they're around 12 or 13, in addition to teaching them that they're adopted, which many of them already know that, and working through the issues of attachment and loss of their biological parents, you're also teaching them their innate vulnerability. That they're vulnerable from a gullibility point of view. They're easily led, easily influenced by peers. The reason that they have difficulties learning is because of the prenatal injury. And that too is a sense of loss, of what potential they could have had.
It's not fair that people are saying you can't help the kids, because that 100% deserves to be acknowledged, just as any other mental illness.
Yes.
And to help with self-esteem especially. Because otherwise they put themselves down because they can see they're different than their peers. They struggle in school, they struggle in social relationships. And if they have kind of a name for it or reason for it, it's like, okay, it's not my fault.
Instead of them just thinking that they're different or not as smart. There's a reason for it. And if they go about learning it early on and understanding it, then I think it'll put them all in a better place for studies.
And they can get help, they can get extra time on tests, and it's okay. It's okay for them to ask for it because it's not their fault.
Daniela, why don't you speak to some of the first-hand experience that you have, because you work with some children who have this condition, and you see them every day of the week.
I do. Yes, I work with 4 children. They're at the age of 10, 12, 13, and 16. And I know them now for the last 6 years, so I kind of could see them growing up. The first time, they're all adopted from Russia, and the first time that for me, like I noticed something was wrong, was when the youngest one started school. We had a really, really hard time practicing the alphabet with him. Like he just couldn't memorize it. It was frustrating for him, it was frustrating for me. We like tried out every game, tried to kind of have him get him to memorize the letters so he's accepted for school. Because that was kind of like the rule, you have to be familiar with your letters or you're not going to get into first grade. So, and then I went to see a couple of psychologists until we came to see Dr. Rich. And like now the kids have an understanding, especially the older ones, of why they have struggles in school, why they have some struggles with friends. They're working on kind of accepting it and getting the teacher to allow them extra times. For the oldest one, who's 16, it was really, really hard because she wanted to be just as her peers. She didn't want to be special. She didn't want to ask for more time. But she got bad grades. She was just so stressed out because she just couldn't finish her schoolwork because it just takes so long. She's not a native English speaker, so that's another fact that influences her on her schoolwork. Yeah, they have really hard. Like it's good for them to keep to have structures, but they have a hard time getting used to the structures. Once they kind of are familiar with it, they can like maintain the structure and live with it.
But adapting to transitions is
that's
difficult.
very
So
hard.
you guys moved recently.
We did.
And it was, pretty difficult to then get back into a routine here at the end of the school year.
Right, it still is. Like,
Yeah.
It's still a hard time. It was their first move, so they were very attached to the other house, but they like the new house too.
And, I think one of the things to keep in mind that it's not just nature, it's also nurture. It's both. And so if you have a child that has difficulty regulating their mood and they've been exposed prenatally, do you want to have like a chaotic home environment with people like hitting them and beating them and yelling at them all the time and demoralizing them further when they go to school all day and they get that at school because they're not, they're struggling academically? Or do you want kind of more peaceful, kind of loving, nurturing environment?
They need the nurturing environment. Like the one comes home every day from school, sad, grumpy because he's getting teased by his peers and just.
Because he's small, right? And he's
The other one.
okay.
Because he's just
Awkward.
he's intellectual, not on the same level as his peers, and they're at the age where they figure it out and they just make fun of him. They use him, and he's such a nice kid. He doesn't think like that he doesn't know that they're using him, and he just thinks they're his friends.
Gullible. In the young women, what you see a lot of times is them being taken advantage of in a sexual way. So I've had a number of young ladies who come to me for the first time in their teens, and I haven't had a chance to really help them understand what's going on. And one young woman was in her junior year of school, kind of invited / coerced to an area behind the football stadium on a day that they were having exams. So you do know how it's kind of loose and the schedule's loose and you have to wait around a lot in between classes. A boy had invited her in behind the stadium at the football field, and of course she went willingly. She thought that hey, this is just somebody that wants to go for a walk. That's what he's telling her. And he molested her in behind there. And then the mother came to the school to try to help with the interview. 2 police officers, huge guys, came in. They insisted that they interview her by themselves. And this is a developmentally disabled child. She's in 11th grade, but she's functionally the age of maybe an 11-year-old. And, by the end of a 2-hour, very intensive, heated discussion, and it was all audio tape, so the mother had it to go back to, they had her convinced that she had wanted the boy to do that so that he could be her boyfriend. And the school did nothing about it. These cases, though, are not infrequent, and unfortunately, unlike this family, they had me, to come to. Many families don't have anybody. That sound, did you like that story? I mean, not like it, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened with this young lady is that her mother came to the school because the school called her, but she wasn't allowed to go into the interview with these two very large police officers from Montgomery County. And they went in, two males, and interviewed this young lady who has developmental disabilities. The mother on the outside of the room kept saying she has learning disabilities, she's disabled, you know, she can't be interviewed. But they saw that she could speak legibly. She wasn't drooling all over herself or like, you know, urinating on herself. She could carry on a conversation, so they assumed that they could interview her. But in fact, she has significant developmental disabilities, maybe to the age of 11-year-old or 12-year-old. And they had convinced her by the end of this 2-hour, very intense interview that she had wanted the young man's advances, that she had somehow encouraged his advances, and because she wanted him to be her boyfriend. And that's just so tragic and so sad. And, you know, she wasn't under the influence of alcohol at the time. She was at school. You know, this is not the same situation as we're talking about when young women go out and they're dating and they're maybe drinking too much. This is a young woman who was affected by prenatal alcohol exposure herself. There's another case of a young woman who's really renowned in the FASD world. She's in her 30s now, but her mother is a very prominent national spokesperson for the issue. And unfortunately, a driver to and from her activities, because she can't, you know, drive herself, she has public transportation, a driver raped her twice in a porta-john, and each time asked her for the $2 fare, like at the end of it. And of course, she didn't have the wherewithal to know what was happening. Yeah. And, you know, they did prosecute the person, but, I mean, the damage had already been done. And this young lady's in her 30s, but she's developmentally the age of maybe an 8-year-old, you know. And there are cases of young women who aren't so, you know, maybe impaired, but they're gullible enough that they would, like you were saying, Daniela, they would follow anybody's lead because they're very trusting. They're very innocent in their
and they try to make friends. They try to please everybody.
And that goes along with why the police officers convinced the little girl that she wanted it. Any suggestion can lead them to go along with it, and then it convinces them very easily.
Right, they're very suggestible. Yeah. And so often what you see when people are interviewed is them confessing to something they haven't done. So you see a lot of times on the national news, oh, after 40 years, this guy gets off death row because, or he gets out of prison because they've proven by DNA evidence that it wasn't him. And I'm not saying in every one of these cases, but there are plenty of these cases that have been around for a long time. The first case I worked on was Larry Demery, who was a young man. He's still, he's actually got a life sentence in North Carolina for the murder of James Jordan, which is, anybody know who James Jordan is? Michael Jordan's dad, late dad. Michael Jordan, anybody know Michael Jordan? I went to UNC Chapel Hill and, you know, for graduate school, but I was at NC State when he played at UNC. So, you know, NC State and UNC are big rivals. But I happened to be working in a rural area of North Carolina when James Jordan was murdered in that same county. And I had picked up a newspaper back in 1994, January 94. I still have a copy of it. When I do my talks, I share that. I saw the picture, you know, Larry Demery and Daniel Green, his co-defendant. And I took one look at Larry Demery, and I'm like, oh no, he's got at least FAE, fetal alcohol effect is what they called it then, and fetal alcohol syndrome. But we were able, after I contacted the attorney, to get him up to Bowman Gray School of Medicine, and he was diagnosed with fetal alcohol effect, which went in as mitigation. He ended up pleading, and he got life. But, I mean, that was the first case I worked on. I've worked on a number of others. But it's interesting, like you were saying, Juliana, that it does permeate the criminal justice system. And the Department of Justice does know this.
Because we've been hearing a lot more, especially recently, people who get off of death row due to them being proven by DNA, but also for that to happen, they have to write letters to like attorneys to come help them, and in the end, most of them aren't even compensated for what they missed out on. And being in jail, locked up for 40 plus years or something, they come out and they still aren't in a good place because they're in a world where so much has changed. They don't have a job, they don't have anywhere to live unless they have like friends or family, like they don't have anything of their own, and they have to adjust to how much society has changed, and society changes so much every day, and not being in jail, you adapt with it, but like when you're locked up and you don't know what's going on in the world, there's nothing that you can do. Like people who were in jail before the iPhone comes out and they come and see this invention that you can literally do anything on, and they're just like, what is this? Something so simple to us but so complicated to them.
Yeah, it's like being in a coma for 40 years or something, right?
Yeah.
A culture shock.
Yeah, and then like some of them, I've watched several documentaries on it, and some of them will be like, all I want from the judge is just an apology for saying that I'm guilty when I'm innocent, and half the time the judges just don't even care.
Yeah, it's so sad. You know, what led me into this is 21 years ago I read a book, and you guys are going to be reading that book over the next week, and next time we're going to talk about The Broken Cord, which is an account of one family's struggles with fetal alcohol syndrome before they really knew what fetal alcohol syndrome is, and it was mainly about how fetal alcohol syndrome has affected Native American communities, but it's really widely affected every ethnic group. There's no ethnic group or nationality worldwide that's immune to it. It's just that different cultures have different drinking patterns, and the way alcohol was introduced to Native Americans was by traders and trappers who drank heavily themselves. They weren't from the elite families of, you know, let's say France and England, who maybe just sipped their wine. You know, these were men that took, you know, distilled spirits and drank them to intoxication and intended for everybody in the room to be completely smashed by the end of the evening. And that's the way that alcohol was introduced to Native American communities. We talked about alcohol dehydrogenase earlier, and certain ethnic groups, including Native Americans, Asians, and other cultures have a difference in the alcohol dehydrogenase that causes them to have a flushing response. And if they would listen to their body and stop when the flush happens, everything would be okay. But what happens in a lot of cases, including on college campuses and everywhere else?
People like to drink to the point where they're just blacked out, falling over, because they just think it's fun and they see everyone else doing it, and it's to the point now where it's like normalcy that you're extremely intoxicated, and it's weird if you're not drinking.
What is that like to go to a party and see your peers just completely, like, is it disgusting?
It's just, you look at them and you're like, that's a different person. That's not the kind of person that I met before and became friends with. Like, they're acting in a way that they would have never acted, but the way that alcohol affects them, it just makes them go so insane.
Right. It shuts down your human brain, right? So you have a human brain, which is our cortex. You've heard of the higher level cortical functions. That separates us from lower primates, right? Our higher cognition. When you shut off the human brain, you then have only the reptilian brain going, okay? And that monitors your heart rate, your blood pressure. The blacked out state is something we talked about at Churchill with the young people. What is blacked out?
They don't remember a single thing in the morning. They have to learn what they did the night before from people who were not as intoxicated as you, who saw your actions. And some people, I don't know why, think it's fun to black out just to hear the story the next day of what you were doing. But it's sick, and you're not in control of any of your actions.
And you could die. You're this close to death, okay? Have you ever seen pictures, or, you know, say, you may have seen it at parties, where somebody like totally decorates the person who's passed out, not just blacked out, because blacked out is where you're glazed over, you're still, you know, kind of walking around, you look conscious. A man could walk you out of the room and everybody think that you're going with him willingly, right?
I think that's why blacking out is worse because, like you said, the human brain shuts off, but that part of your brain that controls walking and talking and your heart beating, so you can still do the normal functions. So a guy can just come up to a girl and take her back, and she will think that it's normal because she doesn't have the mentality to be like, no, this is not okay, like, I need to go home.
And hoping she's consenting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she's not conscious enough to be like, this is wrong, I can't do this. And so then guys will then blame the girls and be like, well, you could have said no, but, like, they're the ones who see that the girl is blacked out, and they'll go and take advantage of it.
You know, one thing, Juliana, and girls that we brought up, and I know Sydney and Juliana didn't have the privilege to be there, but at the Churchill talk, we talked about a related phenomenon, which people are horrified by, and you can tolerate this because you're a criminal justice major, and they've already started desensitizing you, so, you know, brace yourselves. That's the same state that women are in who microwave their babies. Okay, let me tell you how this happens. Okay, and I know, okay, you're shocked, Sydney, but Sarah's already heard this one, and you can relate.
I heard it, yeah.
Okay, tell me about this, Juliana.
How the woman was so blacked out, she went to put the baby's bottle in the microwave, but put the baby in the microwave by accident, and takes it out, and someone comes the next day and sees her pass out on the floor and a dead baby just lying there, and she wakes up and is like, oh my god, what happened to my baby? And she has no idea that she cooked her baby till it died.
Right, and so there are people that would then say, she's not accountable for her actions. Okay, I'm not going to get on that bandwagon myself, because that's not my thing, but, you know, to be honest with you, we do need to start educating people about this, because when their reptilian brain kicks in, anything can happen. A guy could beat a woman to death and swear up and down that he knew nothing about it. And that's, in a lot of cases, true, right? You know, going back to what you were saying earlier, Sydney, about the guy who coerces the girl in this intoxicated state out of the room, and okay, well, he thought that she was consenting. If we're turning it around, like Sarah has told us the kids want us to do, how can we turn it around to give some ownership to the guy? Because I'm having trouble with that, given what you've said.
Well, he could also pay more attention to how her state. Yeah, even if you're blacked out, you can be functioning, but you wouldn't be as functioning like you would be if you were maybe had 3 or 4 drinks less. Then he would really know that she was either consenting or not consenting.
There are also guys who are desperate to be with a girl, and they'll purposely target the ones who don't have the consciousness to be like, I don't want to go home with you, and they'll see that they can take advantage of it and just get them to do whatever they want, and they'll go after those girls. So I think that that's a really big issue, that guys need to start taking responsibility for their actions and not take advantage of girls and blame it on drinking.
And there are some guys that encourage the girls actually
Yeah.
to drink more, so they can take advantage of them.
And they try to, at least from what I've seen and at school, guys try to make the girls drink as much as them and to keep up with them.
Right.
But like we said before, it doesn't metabolize.
It doesn't metabolize the same way, and that's still not counting as consenting. Like, she's not able to actually consent. So they need to be aware of that and not just blind themselves off by saying, okay, like, her body language is accepting, like, that's fine. Like, no, it's not.
Yeah, at school we hear about cases of girls who get raped, and the guys will be like, well, she was dressed inappropriately, she was provocative, and then they'll like see whether or not the girl has like a wristband on to see if they were drinking, and the guy will be like, well, she was drinking, like she agreed to it, and since the girl was drinking, they don't take into account that she wasn't conscious, so they're like, she did it, and alcohol impaired her judgment, so the guy isn't in the wrong, but that's not, I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I don't either. Sarah, you've been through the 4 years of college, right? And you've seen the gamut, right?
Yeah.
So can you give us some of your experience in that way? Because you're 23, 25. Okay, so you're, you're legitimately, you've been around the block.
Right.
Let's be honest with one another. Not as far around the block as I've been, but okay. We'll give you that one.
Yeah. I know, like, from my experience, a lot of girls really get into all these drinking games, and they want to play, and we're really competitive, and we drink with these guys, and they're drinking, and just as much as we are, but we're getting drunk really quickly, and the guys are like, oh, she's fine, she only played like 1 or 2 games, and then they'll carry the girl to the couch and just leave her there, and they're continuing to drink, and the girl's like, has alcohol poisoning.
She could be
and she could die.
Vomiting
and
on herself.
they're like, oh, she's drunk, she'll sleep it off, she's fine. And I know that's a problem, because you can pass out, you can choke on your vomit. It's serious, and that happens a lot. And I know a lot of girls, they get drunk and they walk off with a guy because they're blacked out, and then in the morning, she'll go to her best friend and she'll tell her, and the best friend is really concerned for her, and she's like, well, we were both drunk, so we didn't know what we were doing, so like she doesn't consider it rape, the guy doesn't consider it rape, but it really is. And it's sad that girls don't realize what's happening to them, and I think that's a serious problem.
And a baby could.
Yeah, she could get pregnant.
Contraception.
If they're both drunk, neither of them are going to remember to put on a condom, and if she's not on birth control.
Like how you said that alcohol is the one that causes unprotected sex because it provokes that sexual drive, and you're just like, you don't care about any sort of protection. You're like, oh, and then you always think like, it won't happen to me, it won't happen to me. You hear about happening to other people, but it won't happen to me.
Yeah, and we have to change that, okay? So we're going to turn on 1 light bulb at a time. I've turned on 4, and 5 if we include our trustee, Michael, who is our producer. But, and obviously I've turned on many more, but okay, we're going to start with these 4 here in the room, plus 1. And we're going to hopefully enlighten others by our conversation. And instead of it being about something that's not important, which at least a good half of what you see on YouTube and the internet, no offense, but learning how to put on nail polish and do your hair is not my, forte.
Everyone can relate to this. Like, people have been to college, they know how people drink, and people accidentally get pregnant, they learn that they're pregnant by mistake, like,
and a lot of
it relates to everything.
Yeah, a lot of teenagers have the mentality that they're invincible. And I think, it, like you said, turning on 1 light bulb at a time, I think that's like a main issue. We need to like let teenagers know that you're not invincible, that we're all prone to the same things.
And chances are we all know someone who has been affected by this.
Yeah, right. And if you reach out, you're going to find more and more people. You're going to, what happens, let me just tell you in a nutshell, a young woman may decide not to abort, and that's her choice, right, these days. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. We're neutral on that. However, she fills out the adoption paperwork, and she notes on there when they ask, was there any alcohol or other drug abuse during this pregnancy? What does she note? No. And why is she noting that? Not that we're beating a dead horse, but we kind of are.
Because she stopped drinking after she found out she was pregnant.
So prior to pregnancy recognition, she drank. But once the pregnancy was diagnosed at 4 months, okay, on average, which is when the average heavy user finds out she's pregnant, 4 to 5 months of pregnancy, that baby's brain has already been exposed to enough alcohol for like 10 people's 10 lifetimes.
Because it's within 2 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, right. And so 4 to 5 months, she finds out she's pregnant. She totally stops. She gets involved with an adoption agency. She agrees to adopt the baby and fills out the paperwork. These, unbeknownst to these very nice, very educated parents who think they're getting a nice college girl's baby or a nice, say, 17-year-old baby who is very healthy young woman, right? What are they getting? They're not getting a Russian or Ukrainian adoptee that there is a very high probability of having this. They're getting a baby from the United States who has been prenatally exposed, and the parents don't even know about it. What would be helpful? For them to know, first of all, right?
Yeah.
So they can prepare.
Yeah. Understand it better, at least.
Yeah. And for them to be prepared on how to guide the child
And help them.
and get the right and proper
diagnoses early, the support systems, the services, psychiatric care, for heaven's sake, you know, assistance with their speech and language problems, their OT problems, their occupational therapy for motor issues, their social skills. I mean, this child is going to require a lot of help. They're considered special needs in many cases. Many of them have ADHD, you know, if nothing else. Executive functioning issues, that's the organizing, the planning, the filing. Now, not every child who has executive functioning issues or ADHD is because the mom's drank. But if, say, they have the genetic predisposition to that, it's going to be way worse. And even if they had no genetic predisposition, alcohol can cause some of that. So these are the things we're going to be talking about. I'm hoping that we will catch the attention of people, and that, you know, eventually our blog is going to be kind of passed around amongst, you know, your peer group, and then others' peer groups. And maybe they'll say these ladies are cuckoo, right? And that's okay too, right? At least we'll get some publicity. They'll see a bunch of crazy people
And at least
talking.
they've heard what we had to say.
Right.
Yeah.
At least they've heard what we've had to say, and they can agree to it or disagree with it. We will have a lot of links on our blog about where they can find information if they do not believe us. And they can do exactly what we all have done. Google, Google, Google,
Yeah.
right? If they don't believe us. And they can post comments. Thank you very much, right? We will screen them, you know, but they can post comments. We have ways of doing that.
You can email us.
They can email us, right?
If you have any further question, ideas on what we should talk about.
Of course, we'd be willing to hear out input from other people.
Of course. And in fact, hey, if they want to come and be on our show, we're located in Potomac, Maryland, right? If they want us to come to their school and do a symposium like we did at Churchill, we can do that. Of course, you know, we have to work out the mechanics and the logistics and the finances, but because we're not funded currently. We're kind of working on that piece too, getting a 501c3, but all in due time. Thanks so much, guys, for being a part of this. This is really exciting and terrific. And so next week, we're going to talk about the broken cord. Hopefully between now and then, you'll at least read, like, say, half of it. And just, you know, to get your perspective. We'll have other things that we'll be reading along this summer. And we'll just chit-chat like we did today, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Very good.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome.